Chapter 4 of Short Stories for Short People. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jesus Marquez, Montreal. Short Stories for Short People by Alicia Stuart Aspinwall, Tula, Oolah. Little Celia Cameron lived with her mother in a cottage by the sea. Her father had been a fisherman, but was drowned some years before, when Celia was quite a baby. Since then, her poor mother had to work very hard to support herself and her child. She did washing for the rich city people who spent the summer at the big hotel half a mile down the beach. Good little Celia did all she could to help her mother by gathering driftwood for their winter fire. There was much of this wood to be found on the beach, for many a good ship was wrecked on that dangerous coast. This occupation brought little Celia nearly every day to the beach, where she was as much at home, splashing in the water, as any fish. There were many seals on that coast, who used to come up in the early morning and sit round sociably together, sunning themselves, and lazily rubbing their sides against the rocks. Whether it was because they had got used to seeing her, or because they thought Celia must somehow belong to them on account of her name, I don't know, but they certainly were not afraid of her, but would come quite near, and sometimes even allow her to stroke their wet, glossy backs. There was one seal in particular, with whom she became quite intimate. She often brought him bits of her breakfast, going without herself, poor little thing, in order to do so. Of course, the seal did not know that, but he certainly seemed to be very fond of her, and to appreciate her kindness, looking at her with love and gratitude in his great soft eyes. After a while, he seemed to feel that it was not right for him to be the one to receive presents and to give nothing in return. So after this, every time that Celia appeared, he would dive into the deep water and come to her proudly bearing a gift. And such odd gifts they were: fishes, sometimes living, sometimes dead, bits of wood, a piece of an old chain, and another time a piece of slimy seaweed, fully 10 feet long. Once he brought her a beautiful pink shell. Celia was always very careful to thank the seal, Soft Eyes she called him, for all the things he brought her, whether she really liked them or not, for she would not have hurt his feelings for anything. But when she saw the beautiful pink shell, she gave a shout of delight, and stooping, kissed Soft Eyes right on his wet head. He gave a little contented grunt, and nestled up to her, and there they both sat for a long time, sunning themselves, Soft Eyes munching the cracker she had brought, and Celia examining the lovely shell. It was afterward put on a shelf in the one room of the tiny cottage, and everyone admired it, for it was not often that anyone had so pretty a shell, and particularly one brought up from the ocean bed and given by a soft-eyed, friendly seal. One day, Celia went to the rocks, and her dear friend was not there. "Soft Eyes!" she called, and several seals bobbed up their heads, but Soft Eyes was not among them. Seating herself, she waited, thinking perhaps he had gone farther, trying to get another pink shell for her. "He will be here," she said. And sure enough, she soon heard a great puffing, snorting noise, and on came Soft Eyes, swimming slowly toward her, and carrying in his mouth something. What it was she could not make out. Twice it slipped from him, and he had to dive for it. When he got near, Celia saw that it was an iron box he was carrying. Crawling up on the rocks, he dropped this strange gift by her side, and then looked triumphantly into her face, with eyes that said plainly, "There, what do you think of that for a gift?" Celia didn't know what to say, but looked at the box with the greatest astonishment. "Where did you get it, Soft Eyes?" she said, but he only grunted, thinking no doubt that the little girl was thanking him again for what he had brought her. And indeed it had been no easy matter for him to pick up that heavy iron box from the bottom of the ocean, where it had lain almost hidden by great pieces of iron and a pile of rotten timbers, which had crumbled as he pulled away the box, and which was all that remained of a big ship that had been wrecked there many, many years before. But of this the seal knew nothing, nor of course did Celia. The box was about a foot square, made of iron, and was locked, and there was no name or inscription of any sort on it. "Where's the key, Soft Eyes?" said Celia, but he made no answer. Then she decided to break the lock, so running home, she got a hammer and a very heavy iron spike. She thought it only right to open the box on the beach in the presence of the seal, for she could not help feeling that he would be as much interested as she to see what it contained. And indeed he seemed to be, and sat there breathing hard, with his big eyes fixed steadily on the little girl, who with a beating heart, at last succeeded in prying open the lock. Lifting the lid, Celia and Soft Eyes looked in, and saw, fitted neatly into the box, another exactly like the first. Taking it out, they found that that too was locked. Placing it on the rock between herself and Soft Eyes, Celia looked through the keyhole, but could see nothing. Suddenly, both she and the seal started back, and looked in terror at the box, for from it came an awful sound, as of someone in distress. The voice was soft and muffled, and sounded like a child moaning. The seal was so much alarmed that he scuttled off, and was about to jump into the water when poor little Celia called piteously to him. "Come back, Soft Eyes," she said. "Don't leave me alone with this thing, whatever it is." And the seal, who at heart was ashamed of his cowardice, came back, though with evident reluctance. "Now," said Celia, "whatever is in this is small, and I am sure can't hurt us much, and I am going to find out what it is." So with some difficulty, she broke the lock, and saw still another box. At this, both she and Soft Eyes felt relieved. The seal came quite near, and even bravely smelt of it, which after all was a good deal for him to do, as he was frightened almost out of his wits. Celia lifted the third box out, and now the cries of the creature, or whatever it was inside, grew very loud. This box differed from the others, being made of brass, prettily ornamented with scrollwork. It was quite dry, all the boxes being so tightly fitted into each other that the seawater had been unable to force its way in. This, too, was locked, but its key hung on the handle at the side. Unlocking it, Celia opened the lid very cautiously. The seal, meanwhile, had gone to the edge of the rock again, ready to at once jump into the water, should an enemy spring out upon them. But as nothing of the kind happened, curiosity got the better of him, and joining Celia, they both looked at the box together, and saw, standing in the middle of it, an elephant about 8 inches long. He was exquisitely made, and his wee trunk was waving restlessly from side to side, while he moaned piteously, "Tula, Oolah, Tula, Oolah," over and over again. Celia lifted him out of the box onto her lap, and found to her astonishment that he was not alive, but was made of some hard metal, brass, she thought, for the color was yellow. But if he's not alive, then how can he wave his trunk, and talk? And what, Soft Eyes? Oh, what is he saying? But of course the seal didn't know, and he evidently did not like the looks of the uncanny little elephant at all, for as the small creature raised his voice and said louder and with still more piteous sound, "Tula, Oolah," Soft Eyes gave a yell of terror and jumped into the water, and for 3 days Celia saw nothing of him. She put the poor little animal back into the brass box, and locking it, carried it home and put it on the table. Her mother was away for the whole day, and Celia ran to the cupboard and took out the glass of milk which had been left there for her dinner. She poured a little into a saucer. "He must be hungry," she said, "and perhaps Tula Oolah means 'give me food' in the elephant language." But when she took the little creature out and offered him the milk, he did not take it, and 'twas the same with the bread she then gave him. "Oh, what can it be that you want?" said tender-hearted Celia, who was greatly distressed by its evident grief. "Tula Oolah," was the answer. At last she could bear it no longer, and locking the elephant in his box, she went off for driftwood, taking her lunch with her, for she meant to wait till her mother came home before going into the house and listening again to that pitiful cry. She gathered a great deal of wood, which she piled neatly in the shed at the back of the cottage. At last, when the sun began to go down, Celia saw her mother coming, far down the beach, and ran to meet her. Her mother was much astonished when she heard the story of the elephant, and much more astonished when she saw the little animal herself and listened to his moaning cry. "Celia," she said, "perhaps he's talking French. Now, there is a French gentleman at the hotel, and tomorrow I will ask him to come and see the elephant, and perhaps he can understand him." So the next morning, at about 10, Professor Tourier came to the cottage. "Where is the little elephant?" said he, and when he saw him, he began, "Bonjour, vous parlez français?" "Tula, Oolah," answered the elephant. "Que voulez-vous?" continued the French gentleman, and "Tula, Oolah," moaned the elephant. At last the Frenchman went away, and told all the people at the hotel what he had seen. Among them was a German. "I will myself have one conversation with that little elephant," said he, and followed by the 230 guests of the hotel, he went to the cottage. "Nun, elephant," said he, when he and each of the 230 guests had satisfied their curiosity by looking at the marvelous little animal. "Wie geht's?" "Tula, Oolah," was the answer. "So, kannst also kein Deutsch sprechen?" "Don't speak German, eh?" inquired the German gentleman, sadly. "Tula, Oolah," replied the elephant with equal sadness, and so the interview ended. Then, one of the ladies advised Celia's mother to take him to the gang of Italians who were working on the bridge below the hotel. "What he says sounds to me like Italian," she said. But when the Italians heard the Tula Oolah, they could make nothing of it, nor did the elephant pay the slightest attention to them, although they talked loudly and all together. At last, the landlord said, "Mrs. Cameron, tomorrow a gentleman, a Mr. Newcomb, is coming here, who understands elephants. I mean real ones. He has lived in India for many years. He, I think, will be able to help you." When Mr. Newcomb arrived, he heard about the little elephant, first from the clerk, and then from each of the 230 guests, and the following day, the procession, he leading it, came to the cottage, and he at last was able to help them. "Tula Oolah?" he said inquiringly to the elephant. And "Tula Oolah!" answered the little creature, no longer sadly, but joyfully. "I understand him," said Mr. Newcomb. "He is speaking the language of a people who live in the southeastern part of northwestern Hindustan. Now, it happens that I lived right among those very people for several years, and I'm glad that you came to me, as I am probably the only man in this country who can speak and understand their language." "Then, what, oh what, is he saying?" asked Celia, and her mother, and the 230 guests. "He says Tula Oolah, which means, put me in the water." "But what for?" said Celia and the 230, but Mrs. Cameron ran at once to fill her largest tub with water. When it was full, little Celia dropped the elephant, who was now shrieking, "Tula Oolah! Tula Oolah!" joyfully, and at the top of his voice, into the middle of the tub. The minute his feet touched the water, he raised his trunk, threw his head back, and gave vent to a most ear-piercing shriek. How such a small creature could produce such a sound was hard to understand, and the German gentleman and the French gentleman were so much alarmed that they immediately ran out of the cottage. The 230 guests who were waiting outside, hearing the loud cry, and seeing the two frightened gentlemen, who were evidently bent on getting away as quickly as possible, became alarmed too, and ran for their lives, and the beach was soon quite deserted. In the cottage itself, only Celia and her mother and the ex-Indian gentleman were left, and they all stood there, watching carefully the wee elephant to see what would happen next. He swam lazily round the tub 3 times, trumpeting loudly and apparently having a very fine time. The water in the tub, meanwhile, had begun to change. It had grown quite thick, like molasses, and was of a bright yellow color. After the elephant had been round the 3 times, he swam slowly to the middle. There he remained for fully a minute, trumpeting occasionally, but more softly, while the water grew constantly thicker and yellower. At last, raising his trunk once more, he said softly and very sadly, "Oolah," and then began slowly to sink. "Oh!" screamed Celia, "he is drowning!" And she put out her hand to save him, but the gentleman prevented her, reminding her that the little creature was not really alive. "I think I know all about this, but wait," he said. Down, down, down went the elephant, till only the very top of his head could be seen. Then that too disappeared, leaving only a little depression. At this the 3 looked for a moment, till even that vanished, and the tub stood there filled with a solid yellow mass of something. It was perfectly hard and smooth, and looked like burnished brass. They tried to lift it, but found it so heavy that it was utterly impossible for them to move it. Mr. Newcomb then hurried away, and soon returned with a chemist who examined carefully what was in the tub, and pronounced it to be pure gold. They were all, of course, very much surprised, except indeed Mr. Newcomb. "I suspected this might be gold," he said, "and I will tell you why. I have, as I told you, lived among the people in the southeastern part of northwestern Hindustan, the country from which this elephant probably originally came. It is a mountainous region, and the people live isolated lives. They have many interesting legends which have been handed down from father to son, and among them one that I think may apply to this case." Then Mr. Newcomb translated the legend for them. "If you find an elephant made of brass, an elephant small and old, through Oolah, the water, allow him to pass, and the Oolah shall turn to gold. This little elephant is undoubtedly one of that kind, and is probably many 100 years old." The gold was broken into small pieces so that it could be more easily carried away and sold. Celia insisted on staying in the room while this was being done, or she could not help feeling that somewhere in it she should find the elephant. But they did not find him, although in breaking the last bit of gold, which had been in the middle at the very bottom of the mass, they came upon 2 tiny tusks, and that was all that was left of the Tula Oolah elephant. The gold proved to be very pure, and when sold was worth a great many $1,000s, so that Celia and her mother became very rich people. They gave a large lump of it to Mr. Newcomb, for without his help they might never have got the gold at all, and they were very grateful to him. They built a beautiful house on the beach, so that Celia could always be near her dear friend, Soft Eyes, the seal, who had brought all this good fortune to his dear little friend. End of Tula Oolah. Recording by Jesus Marquez, Montreal, June 26, 2015.